And away we go. It's the DFS Early Bird presented by Awesemo.com. Dan Stratford. Wow, can't even pronounce my own name. I'm going to pronounce Adam's name correctly. Dan Stratford and Adam Scher here with you. I don't know if you heard, Adam. Lofty and I were talking about last name pronunciation, and he finally gave an explanation of why he can't pronounce your name correctly.
Yeah. He told me it's a family member that has a similar name, but it's pronounced Shar, which is how he always pronounced mine.
Right. So I'm just going to tell him I have a good friend named Bobby Antetokounmpo who pronounces his name very specifically. No, not really. But anyway, how the hell are you doing, Adam?
Doing pretty good. Really looking forward to the All-Star break, but excited to have one more full slate before we get there.
You are traveling, yes?
Yeah, going to Miami for the second half of the break. Get away from home, get away from the cold and the rain, hang out with Manny for a little bit.
So, all right, it is a Manny Laura. It's a Manny special, if you will. To recall a phrase from the olden days.
Yeah, I needed somewhere warm to go, and I was like, oh, I've never actually been to Miami. Like, I've been to Florida a bunch, but I've never been to Miami. And then I was like, oh, and I have a friend there, so why not?
Miami is a fun city. Miami is potentially the place I've spent the most money with getting the least out of it, if that makes sense. Yeah. It is expensive as all get out, but it is so during college, I got to travel doing games for Rutgers. I got to travel doing play-by-play, and we went to Miami 3 different times. And the 2 last times I was over 21, so obviously I got to enjoy it a little bit more. And I've said many times, it's beautiful people, beautiful weather, and beautifully high bills that you need to pay when all is said and done. So just make sure Manny's paying.
Yeah, there we go.
But with that said, we're going to dive into this 11-game slate. Adam and I will take you position by position. But before we get there, I do want to remind you all that Awesemo.com is giving away 1 free year of content. That is a full-fledged $700 value to have a subscription to Awesemo.com. We're giving it away for free on YouTube. So if you're listening on iTunes or on a different podcasting app, you want to head on over to iTunes, subscribe to the channel, like this video specifically, and then in the comments section, we want you to leave your favorite play of the night. Whoever it is, whoever you think for this 11-game slate is going to be your most owned. If you're an MMEer or if you're a single entry guy or gal, who you think you're going to start your lineup construction around. Can be 1 name, can be 2. You can give us an explanation as to why, but we want you to leave a comment of who is your favorite play on this slate. We'll get Adam's at the end. You'll get mine as well as we go through, but want to get that from each and every one of you. So, Adam, are you ready for some point guard discussion?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, so we have James Harden. Kyrie Irving, we were talking before recording, was out Tuesday. He has the knee sprain, and again, you can discuss the severity of that injury. He was listed as day-to-day. I wonder if they'll keep him out through the All-Star break, give him the full, extra couple of days here. I know he's supposed to play in the All-Star break. Maybe he sits that out as well and comes back to rejoin the Celtics and try to make a push towards the playoffs. Steph Curry is 9-2. Doncic, who is now back to point guard, small forward, eligible on DK. Love how they switch positions like this for a person who hasn't changed any of their usage at all.
Right.
But listen, like if a power forward starts playing center regularly, I get it. But when they do this with the Doncic's and Ben Simmons of the world, I don't get it because they don't change the way they play the game. Chris Paul is here at 7,600. Kyle Lowry is down to 7,300 on DraftKings. He's been hovering in that range between 7 and 7,500 over the past couple of weeks. Remember, he was up much more expensive earlier on in the year. Dennis Smith Jr. up to 6,300 against Philadelphia. And Jamal Murray here against Sacramento at 6,200. No one's jumping out at me here with great matchups or guys who I'm going to follow over myself to play. Top end, let's say 7K and above. Who are some of your favorite names to at least think of as part of your player pool to start this slate?
Luka, just like every other day.
Yep.
I mean, he's still 8,800 on DraftKings. You mentioned the small forward eligibility there, so it makes it even easier to get him in the lineups. Miami's not the best matchup in the world, but this is a $10,000 player that is still way lower than that. He's averaged about 1.4 DraftKings points per minute since the start of January. He's got a like 33 or 34% usage rate over that stretch. He's got a 40% assist percentage. He rebounds. The guy does everything, and he plays 34 to 35 minutes a night. So it's really tough for me to get away from Luka there. I don't really care about the matchup with him. A pretty interesting spot for Steph. I still think the price tag is reasonable for his upside. The concern would be that, we've gotten almost a month now of games with DeMarcus Cousins back, and we've seen Steph's usage come down, but Cousins is out for this game. He'll be resting. And so I think that you see more usage for Curry. You see more usage for Durant. Potentially, you could see their minutes staggered as well. That's something that Steve Kerr was doing, and then he stopped when Cousins came back. So, potentially you see that start up again. I think that I would put him behind Luka, but that I still really, really like Steph here.
Yeah, Luka is one of those guys who I think has been a little bit of a tough nut to crack from a analysis standpoint, because you made the point. He's just not priced right. We can debate whether or not the NBA is getting soft and a 19-year-old Euro kid should come in and dominate this way, but he is. And he's doing things on the court that should not be necessarily possible by a kid of his age. But you made the point, 28.2% usage on the year, taking a 10-game sample, last 10 games, up to 32.5. Assist percentage of 45.6. Just all the numbers bear out that Doncic should be a 5-figure player on DraftKings, and he's discounted by $1,200. So maybe he's more small forward than point guard here, simply because point guard typically deeper. But he is somebody that I would be starting my lineup construction with, and maybe my overall favorite play of this slate at that price point. But we'll get to that as we go through. What about mid-tier? You got a guy like De'Aaron Fox against Denver. Kyle Lowry, as mentioned, still sits in the low 7K. Terry Rozier, if you have Kyrie out again, is up to 6,900. And you have a guy like Dennis Smith Jr. Talk about usage, talk about minutes played. He's going to get the run for the Knicks. A price point that's creeping up a little bit, but still somewhat reasonable. Who do you like in the mid-tier?
I still love Dennis Smith Jr. He didn't have a great game against Cleveland his last time out, but he still played between 31 and 32 minutes. You're seeing his minutes fluctuate with the Knicks, but it's outside of that first game where he had a shortened rotation and then picked up a couple of fouls. We haven't seen like mid-20s in minutes. It's just whether he plays 30 or 32 or 36. But the price tag's not really moving. And he is someone who this year with Dallas, when Luka wasn't on the floor, which is a pretty close approximation of the Knicks right now, had a 26.2% usage rate, a 33% assist percentage. Since going to the Knicks, his usage rate's been even higher. He's been in line for actually positive regression in terms of rebounding. When you look at rebound chances versus the actual rebounds he's grabbed, he's getting a ton of potential assists. So I expect the assist percentage to remain really high. I think that while Philadelphia has been very good defensively over the last month, it is a pace-up spot for the Knicks. And I think Dennis Smith is still just really underpriced for his current role.
Anybody else in the mid-tier that at least stands out from a point guard perspective?
Not to the extent that like Dennis Smith does or Luka does. D'Angelo Russell at 8,500 against Cleveland, kind of upper mid-tier, but a really good spot for him. I expect around 33 minutes out of him, and he's obviously played really, really well. But as far as, true mid-tier guys go, there's a pretty big drop for me from Dennis Smith.
Any of these Clippers guards intrigue you against the Phoenix Suns, Gilgeous Alexander or Pat Bev at 5K?
It's just tough because that backcourt is so crowded now. You bring in Garrett Temple, you bring in Green and Shamet, and not the Green's in the backcourt, but it's just another player out there. It's really crowded. You had 32 minutes from Beverly against Minnesota. You had 22 from Shai Gilgeous Alexander. So, if I had to go to one of them, it would be Beverly. We've seen the minutes still be there, not the 36 that he was playing prior to the trade, but, still playing around 30. So I can see getting there, but it's not somewhere that I really love being.
All right, let's take a quick peek at any cheap value down deep. Probably not much here that's going to open up necessarily early on. I guess we can watch if Mike Conley suits up or not for Memphis. He was out for an illness on Tuesday. You assume that's going to right itself there, but we'll keep an eye on that. On Wednesday, Dave does have your write-up, though. Adam is here on the early bird. We will get Dave writing the deep dive on this 11-game slate. And then Adam and Lofty get you have a Thursday slate. What, 3 games on Thursday? Is that right?
Yeah, 3 games on Thursday.
So you get a 3-game slate and then much-deserved time off for Lofty and Adam. Though, if I was Tom or Alex, I'd be making you guys write hockey just because. But or MMA. You were talking about writing some MMA. Let's make that happen.
Yeah, I'll get on that.
let's go. You should. I would love that write-up. It would be amazing. So this guy hits really hard. I don't know what that means exactly, but
I don't know how the scoring works, but
he made somebody bleed.
Right. I wouldn't want to fight this guy, so I'll put him in.
If I was out at the bar and this guy picked a fight with me, I'd walk out.
Right.
All right. And that's anyone for me. But small forward is up next. We talked about Doncic already at 8,800, but it does become sort of game theory is the wrong term, but roster flexibility and positional scarcity. Kawhi's just 9,400. Durant just 93. You mentioned Boogie being out already for Golden State. Is 500 more for Durant a good spot to maybe pivot to a Durant, or do you see ownership being somewhat even between Doncic and KD on this slate?
I kind of assume it's going to come out pretty even because I really don't think people completely believe in Luka yet. You know, there have been spots where, I mean, the last game he played, for example, he was, I think, 8,700 against Houston, and you got him at 6% owned on a 9-game slate. I don't think people realize quite how underpriced Luka is. And, you know, it makes sense because we don't have previous years of, you know, data where it's like, oh, he used to be 10.5, now he's 85. Everyone just kind of is like, oh, yeah, he's this $8,000 player. And whereas, you know, Durant has the name value and the, you know, previous history. So where you look at Durant and he's 9,300 and it's just like, wow, that's a really cheap price tag on Durant. So I think that you probably see ownership pretty close, but I just think that Luka has more of an opportunity than KD does. You know, obviously Cousins being out helps Durant just like it helps Curry, but I just still think Luka's the, you know, better point per minute player.
All right. What about a Tobias Harris or Danilo Gallinari, former teammates here with the Clippers? You have Gallinari against the Phoenix Suns. You have Tobias Harris against the Knicks. Is the Philadelphia situation just too hit or miss, depending on what slate we're getting and who might get the most usage between Embiid and Simmons and Butler and Harris at this point?
Yeah, it's pretty tough to figure out. One thing Lofty and I talked about on the deeper dive yesterday was that Ben Simmons' rebound opportunities have really been down since Harris got there. Granted, at that point had been only 2 games. Last I checked, Simmons was having another really bad rebounding game against Boston. So that's really concerning for Simmons. On the flip side, Harris has been getting the rebounds. He has, through the first 2 games, was averaging 12.5 rebound chances per game. And his price tag's still pretty affordable. So while you don't see a lot of usage for Harris, and I do expect him to fall in behind Embiid, Simmons, and then be similar to Butler in that regard, you're still seeing some potential assists from Harris. You're seeing a lot of rebounding opportunities. And so I think that the $6,800 price tag on Harris is fine. I would rather go to Gallinari, though, at that price point, in a really good spot against Phoenix. He only played 26 minutes against Minnesota his last game, but I don't really know why that was. I think it kind of just had to do with game flow. But he's got about a 25% usage rate without Tobias Harris on the floor this season. I think that he's pretty clearly the number 1 option on that offense. So I really like the spot for him.
All right, what do we do when we get into the mid-tier of small forward? You have guys like Thad Young. You have Josh Jackson at 5,900, Oubre, Ariza, Otto Porter. I think these are all the same players over and over again. But is there anybody who stands out matchup-wise, minutes-wise, usage-wise here in the mid-tier of small forward at least that can give you a potential leg up against some of your other owners in DFS?
I think Will Barton's pretty interesting. He's got a really good matchup against the Kings. He played 36 minutes 2 games ago. He played 32.3 minutes last game, and that was with Millsap back. You know, Millsap came off the bench, but it was with him back in the rotation. And he lost 2 minutes to blowout at the end of the game. So I think that, you know, you have Barton playing 32 to 34 minutes in a really good spot. Maybe he goes a little bit overlooked, but the price tag is too low. Like, I'd rather take him against Sacramento than Porter against Memphis or Oubre against the Clippers, you know, Ariza against Toronto. Like, I would give Barton the edge over all those guys.
What about a bounce back here? We talked about Doncic. Do we get a Tim Hardaway Jr. bounce back against some Miami Heat, or is this just a situation where in the starting lineup you can't trust THJ?
As long as he's 51, you know, around 5K, I'm going to end up just still going there. I mean, he's getting his shots. He has a 25% usage rate since the trade. He's always been an inconsistent scorer, but you know that the ceiling's there. He's the kind of guy that as soon as he gets into that like 6 to 6,600 range after a couple of good shooting games, I back off. But until we get there, I'll just keep, you know, riding with Tim Hardaway at that price tag.
So, for those of you who listen and don't know, Adams had a decent NBA season, some ups and downs, but has had a good run at times in MME and GPP play in NBA. For someone like Hardaway Jr., is it a process that your numbers are giving you more of him, or will you tweak enough where you're looking at your crunches and you're looking at your outputs to get more of him?
It's normally that my numbers will give me enough. I obviously haven't projected this slate out yet, but I normally will get around, like a 30 to 32 point projection for Hardaway, given the minutes that he's playing and the opportunities he has with Dallas. And so when he's still around 5K, that ends up, it's not enough points where it gets him into a ton of my lineups, but he obviously shows up in them. And then if we have him projected for lower ownership because people maybe are shying away because he's let them down the last couple of games, then he ends up getting into more of my lineups once I kind of finalize them and start accounting for ownership.
Yeah, and I think that's an intriguing part of MMEing and Fantasy Cruncher that people don't fully get, and it's sort of statistics at writ large of the numbers you put in, right? The projections you have should bear out the outcome you're at least projecting towards. Like that all of those should jive. You shouldn't have to go in and manually update a lot of things to account for what you feel is going to happen. Your projections should account for all those things.
Right, especially in basketball.
Right. Yeah, so absolutely. That is a very good point. Baseball will be here soon enough, and you will hear a completely different conversation around similar projections at times. Any cheap options here at small forward, at least early on, that are worth keeping on a radar? Someone like a Justin Holiday, a Damari Carroll, anybody that at least should be player pool eligible on this slate, a Bogdanovich perhaps?
Yeah, I was going to say both guys from the Kings, Harrison Barnes and Bogdanovich. Kind of different in that I love Bogdanovich as a player, but the minutes aren't always there.
Yep.
Barnes I hate as a DFS play, but the minutes are there. Both, going up against Denver in what could be kind of a sneaky fast game. Denver doesn't always play at a fast pace, but we've certainly seen when they play faster teams at times this year that they'll go out there and run. So both of those guys, Barnes at 5K, Bogdanovich at 4,900 on DraftKings are pretty interesting.
Denver's a mid-tier pace team on the year? No, they're low. Wow, they're 27th overall on pace. All right, well, fair enough. That's amazing. That's one of the teams that has slipped under the radar for me over the course of the season. But over the last 10, let's check. They're 21st. So, yeah, pretty bad. All right, fair enough. Let's go on to power forward.
I think we skipped shooting guard.
Did I manage to click through that quickly?
Either that or I just blacked out and don't
remember. No. I clicked because of Doncic.
Oh, okay.
I clicked because of Doncic. Let's go back to shooting guard. I had Doncic up, and that's why I transitioned to small forward. Let's go to shooting guard. We'll go back, confusing everyone who's listening. Don't forget, for a free a shot at a free Osmo.com subscription, you can leave your favorite play of the game. May not be a shooting guard because we haven't covered it yet, but you can leave it below. So quickly doubling back to shooting guard here. You have Harden, obviously, at 11.8. Brad Beal is 8.7. Curry, 9.2. D'Angelo Russell, you mentioned at the sort of higher end of point guard. You got Lou Williams, CJ McCollum. Lots of options, names here that we typically have at least some sort of love for. Was it you that said Devin Booker is becoming as soft as Anthony Davis? Was that your quote?
Yeah, that was me. That was me tilting in our chat the other day on that terrible Sunday slate that I should have even played.
Yep, and you said you played all three of the slates, which is impressive on a day that had 5 games spread out across 12 hours. What do you got here at shooting guard that I did skip?
Yeah, so Devin Booker, I like. He actually toughed it out, came back in that game, and ended up somehow getting to a reasonable score against Sacramento. But now faces a Clippers team in what should be a pretty reasonably paced game, but you just have Booker out there without TJ Warren putting up, a 33% usage rate with a 33% assist percentage. Obviously he plays on a really bad team and he's, a pretty volatile player, but there's all the upside in the world for him. And it's kind of like D'Angelo Russell's been all season long where, maybe on a point per dollar basis, there are better projected plays, but when you start factoring in volatility and upside, Booker kind of just stands out. So, I like him. I like Bradley Beal just because he plays so many minutes. He has such a big opportunity with Washington. Obviously, a terrible matchup going against Toronto, but they haven't been quite as good defensively lately. Not sure I know Sadaransky missed the last game for personal reasons. I haven't seen if he's back.
It says game time decision for Wednesday.
Okay, so if Sadaransky's back, then it takes some of the appeal away from Bradley Beal because Sadaransky obviously has the ball in his hands a decent amount. But if Sadaransky's out, and this went completely overlooked apparently by a lot of people in the game against Detroit because Beal was like 6% owned, Beal becomes the de facto point guard. Like you can put Chase and Randall out there, you can put Jordan McRae out there. Bradley Beal has the ball in his hands basically all the time. And without Sadaransky, without Wall this season, he's got a 30% assist percentage and about a 34% usage rate. It's Luka Doncic type numbers from Beal. He's averaged 1.5 fantasy points per minute. So he goes from like a kind of marginal play if Sadaransky's in to another really, really good play if he's out.
Makes a lot of sense, and somebody to keep an eye on. Wonder if that ownership will tick up simply because he had a 62.5 DraftKings point outing last time out, and if people will key in on why that happened, which doesn't always happen in analysis. Mid-tier, we did touch on some of these guys over at small forward as we skip around here accidentally. But any names you want to throw into the mix as guys you have in your player pool early on here?
Lou Will against Phoenix. He's coming off a monster game against Minnesota. So he's someone where he's one of those guys where I definitely want to keep an eye on his projected ownership because the minutes are going to be volatile, I think. And, obviously he's a scoring dependent player, but his price tag's, reasonable here. He got 34 minutes against Minnesota, 28 the game before that. That's kind of the range that I expect him to come into on a night-to-night basis. But he's averaged 1.4 points per minute without Tobias Harris on the floor this season. 35% usage, 35% assist percentage. When he's out there, it's him and Gallo, but he's really the offense. And it's obviously a great spot against Phoenix. He's capable of just going nuts against anyone. So if he's going to fall, kind of go overlooked again on a slate this big, which is pretty likely, I think that he's a good tournament play again.
Anybody else worthwhile to mention cheap end of the pool or ready to move on to power forward now that I've screwed up our rotation here?
Dion Waiters is still 4,300 playing big minutes. It's fine. It's Dion Waiters, but
it's fine. Everything's fine. Dion Waiters is Tim Hardaway Jr. Tim Hardaway Jr. No, somewhere in there. Basically, Dion Waiters can kill a slate if he gets hot from three. So
I liked. I'm not sure if you follow probably my last login or not, but the other day when Waiters had that game against Golden State where he was just making like all of his shots, he tweeted something along the lines of Dion Waiters is playing as well as Dion Waiters thinks Dion Waiters plays.
Yeah, exactly right. There it is. You're a DC Maryland guy, so you may not know Francesa. I'm sure you know from DFS stuff, Mike Francesa from WFAN.
Yeah, he's on the Creative Fantasy Sports, right?
Yeah, exactly right. He's crazy for doing a lot of Jorge Posada was Johnny Bench before Johnny Bench was Jorge Posada. And he just says things like that, and people are like, yeah, that's right. What the hell are you even saying?
Right,
like that
right.
Logically doesn't make any sense. And I was trying to make that connection where Waiters, listen, at 4,300, if Waiters goes off and hits, again, 6 of 12 from 3 and picks up some peripherals, 40 to 44 DraftKings points is going to make a big difference in your lineup. Now, there's obvious downside where Waiters has a game like he did against Sacramento where he goes 4 for 9 from 3, but also 4 for 12 overall, no peripheral stats, and gives you 16.75. So I have not rostered him recently, but I completely understand the reasoning why someone may roster Dion Waiters on a slate like this, especially if you're trying to get up for some of these higher price guys like a Giannis Antetokounmpo, who we talked a bit about at small forward. And I will note this because I know people will yell at us in YouTube comments that we skipped over shooting guard. I will make sure to note it in the title and in the body of the description, but I'm sure I'll still get shit for it. But anyway, we go to power forward next. You do have Giannis, KD, Kawhi. Blake Griffin is here at 8,900. Lauri Markkanen has a matchup with Memphis at 8,100. How much has the trades that have happened found their way into your projections and into your process? Like a team like Memphis, defensively, have you changed things because of the deals they've made and who has left that team? Or do you still find that defensive metrics are at least reliable enough from a projection standpoint that you think you can trust them moving in?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't changed anything too much yet just because we still don't really know. Like, we don't have numbers that bear out yet how things are going to change. I have an idea about it. I think Memphis is going to struggle defensively. I think they're going to struggle rebounding. And I think maybe they start playing a little bit faster. But, we don't really have anything to bear that out yet. So it's more of, if I'll just keep an eye on what my guys are doing. And if I think that they're projected too low, then that's a spot where I actually, even in NBA, would look to kind of manually bump them a bit.
All right, so what do we got here at power forward? Who stands out to you?
Lauri Markkanen still just playing out of his mind, rebounding really well. No Bobby Portis, no Jabari Parker, I think is, because they were both bench players, probably something that people aren't really accounting for when they, look at stuff. But Markkanen has close to a 25% usage rate without either of those guys on the floor. Zach LaVine's up at like 31%. It gives more usage to these guys. And then also you just get more rebounds because, for one, Bobby Portis got a lot of rebounds. Now he's not there. And for two, now that Otto Porter is with the team, we see Markkanen playing a pretty decent amount of minutes at the 5, which gives him more rebounding. We saw 2 games ago, Lopez play 18 minutes, Felicio played 12, Markkanen played the other 18 at center. Last game, Felicio didn't play. Robin Lopez played 33 minutes. You got 15 minutes at center for Lauri Markkanen. So it's a bigger Memphis front court than Chicago has played the last couple of games. But I would still expect that you see Markkanen get time at the 5, and I think it's more likely that you see maybe like Joakim Noah get the night off because they don't want him out there with Markkanen than that Markkanen doesn't play center.
How many minutes did Noah play the other day? He played
like 30 something.
I know he's not that old. I get it, but he is one of those guys. I feel it. Luol Deng's the other one. Luol Deng, I feel like, is 73 years old. Luol Deng is 33.
Is he real? God, I thought he was like 39.
I looked at, and maybe I read it wrong. Listen, I've said and done things in my broadcast career that I've gotten completely wrong, but I want to double check this. Yeah, he's 33 years old. He was born in 1985.
Wow.
Now, again, and this is not a slight against anyone, but he was born in the South Sudan, and there have been many African-born players whose ages have been maybe doctored a little bit when coming over. But he's 33. Yeah. And I feel like a similar thing for Joakim Noah. I feel like Noah's been beaten down so much that he's – how old is Joakim?
33.
Yep, there it is. Oh, it's the number. It's the Jesus year. That's what it is. There it is. So let's talk about mid-tier here at power forward. Want to get your take on the Cleveland Cavaliers. You have Larry Nance Jr. here at power forward, has center eligibility as well, I do believe. Now, Kevin Love is back. You have Chris, who may be one of the worst professional basketball players in recent memories. But is Larry Nance Jr. the de facto center here? I like to target Brooklyn for centers. Can I lean on Nance? Do I have to worry about Love? How do you break down this situation?
I mean, you have to worry about Love. The thing is, so we saw Love play like 6 minutes his first game, then he played 15 or 16, sat out the second half last game, which probably not coincidentally is when Larry Nance went absolutely nuts.
Yep.
So, now, I don't know, let's say we're getting Love to like 20, 22 minutes. I still think that Nance is a perfectly fine play in this spot. Obviously, Kevin Love cuts into his production because Kevin Love shoots a lot and Kevin Love's a great rebounder. So it's not ideal that Larry Nance's price is finally rising as Kevin Love is getting more minutes, and that you'll almost certainly still see really high ownership on Larry Nance because he was like 60% on last slate and rewarded people by going for almost 10 times the salary.
Right.
So it's starting to at least get to the point where, like last slate, he was my highest owned player. Now, and I knew he'd be highly owned. I just didn't care. I just shoved him in like almost every lineup. Now it's getting to the point where you can start to at least consider pivoting to other similarly priced guys that are going to come at much lower ownership because he's no longer kind of in a tier by himself where no one has the same kind of upside. So it's still a really good spot. It's just that you want to be more cognizant of ownership now.
What do we got here with Bobby Portis? Is this a run that is legitimate and a guy that Scott Brooks is going to run into the ground like he has with everybody else on his roster? Or do you see sort of a righting of the ship and maybe price point at 6,300 against Toronto is a little bit too much?
So I think it's going to be risky every single slate because the Wizards now basically have several different players that they can use interchangeably in Jeff Green, Bobby Portis, Jabari Parker, to a lesser extent Thomas Bryant. What I think is going to happen is that you're going to get 16 to 18 minutes a night from Thomas Bryant as the starting center, and then you're going to get 2 out of 3 of Parker, Portis, and Green playing somewhere around 28 to 30 minutes, with the other one playing in the lower 20s. Last game, it was Parker. Portis shot 6 of 10 from 3. He scored 16 points in the fourth quarter and clearly was not coming off the floor. That could be Jabari Parker tonight. So the minutes are going to be scary, and it's the kind of spot where you can kind of just always it would be profitable over the rest of the season. I think to anytime Bobby Portis is really popular to play Jabari Parker or Jeff Green and vice versa. So yeah, it's nothing wrong with Portis. I'll project him for 28 minutes here. He's a greater than a point per minute player. It's just that again there are guys here that can take those minutes from him.
Right. Makes sense. Power forward is not terrible, I would say, on this slate. I think we've had some pretty bad situations at power forward, but I think there are a few names that you might run through here. Mid-tier, you have the likes of Ivan Robb, whose price point has come up to $5,800. Plumlee is what's his name out again? Why am I blanking on power forward from Denver, who used to be on Atlanta? Millsap. Is Millsap out again?
He came back last game. I haven't seen anything, but I assume he's in.
Okay, so Plumlee had seen some bigger run there because of Millsap being out. Last game, still saw 31 minutes, right? So
he still started. Millsap came off the bench.
Okay, so what about this mid-tier between a Jackson for Phoenix, Plumlee, Robb, and then we have Ariza, Porter, Sabonis, Parker, all the guys that have run there in Washington. Jeff Green, you mentioned again. What do you got? Anybody else in this mid-tier?
Yeah, there's a couple, pretty high upside tournament plays, I think. Pascal Siakam at 6,500 against Washington.
Siakam.
Yeah. I love the guy. He's just so good at everything. Not getting minutes at center anymore, which kind of sucks, now that Marc Gasol's there. But we still saw 35 minutes from him against Brooklyn, and he's cheap enough in a spot against a Washington defense that cannot rebound that I think he's a pretty appealing option. You mentioned Ivan Robb against Chicago, and he got in early foul trouble last night against whoever it was they were playing. I can't remember. San Antonio. But he's the starting center here. I think he plays, 28 to 30 minutes in most games. It's not a scary spot here against Chicago with, Robin Lopez starting. And, again, potentially maybe Robb gets more minutes at center if Joakim Noah loses some minutes because of how small Chicago may go.
Yep.
So I think that a $5,800 price tag with no ownership, most likely on Ivan Robb, is pretty appealing in tournaments.
What do you make, and I believe I read this correctly, that Saunders in Minnesota said that they had tweaked some things for Dario Saric to understand or be a bigger part of the offense. Went out against the Clippers, had 33 minutes, had 19 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, 37.5 DraftKings points. Does he have upside here against Houston?
Yeah, no question. So for one, he played 33 minutes despite getting 2 fouls in the first 1 minute and 37 seconds of the game. So it was really good to see that he still got the minutes, and Saunders, didn't immediately sour on him. But you go back to his time in Philadelphia, and when he's gotten opportunities to play, he's been a productive player. And now he's going to get that opportunity here. He's only 4,600. Assuming Andrew Wiggins is back, that puts a higher usage player into the lineup than Luol Deng. But Saric at 4,600. He can still go out there and get you between 0.8 and 0.9 fantasy points per minute, if not more. Not a bad matchup against Houston, so I still like him.
Any other power forwards you want to mention before hitting on center and closing it out?
Marvin Bagley still at 5,900 gives you a lot of upside. He was barely owned in the game against Phoenix on Sunday, which was a lot of fun. And he played, I think, 20 minutes the first game after Harrison Barnes got there, but he picked up 3 fouls in the first half. So I think it had more to do with that than anything else. Last game, we saw 33 or 34 minutes with him stealing minutes from Harry Giles at center, with him playing a bunch of minutes, behind Bjelica still at power forward. So I still think you get 28 to 30 minutes from Bagley at a pretty appealing sub 6K price tag.
All right, let's close it out with center. We went point guard to small forward to shooting guard to power forward, and now we close it out with center. It's positionless basketball. That's what it is. That's what we're doing here on the DFS Early Bird. We have Embiid, Towns, and Jokic, all 5 figures. Embiid clearly with a good matchup with, listen, Mitchell Robinson, DeAndre Jordan are an intriguing tandem. They're in New York longer term. I know DAJ is somebody I expected to be waived. There has been talk that he is a good mentor for Mitchell Robinson and a good locker room guy. And he's been playing 24 to 26 minutes and playing decent defense, but he's not who he once was in LA, and not necessarily the high upside guy from an offensive perspective. So Embiid has a good matchup here. Towns against Houston with that small front court. I know Fareed's been playing very well. And then you have Jokic against Sacramento, which has been a good matchup all season as well. Any of these 3 10K plus guys intrigue you at all, or are you finding yourself cheaper at center?
All of them. I see it being a slate on DraftKings where I look to play multiple centers in as many lineups as I can because this position is absolutely stacked with upside. Jokic should never, ever, ever be $10,000 or close to $10,000, and he certainly should not be against Sacramento. This is a guy playing 34 to 35 minutes a night. He has a 40% usage rate over the last month plus. He's got a 28% usage rate. He averages like 1.65 points per minute at 10K in a phenomenal spot. So I love him. He's my favorite, probably my favorite play on the slate. Karl Anthony Towns not far behind him. Houston has been one of the worst rebounding teams since Clint Capella's injury. Towns disappointed in his last game. Having Teague and Rose back, and I'm assuming Wiggins back as well, basically puts Towns in the worst position he can ever be in. But that still makes him a 1.5 fantasy point per minute player in a great matchup. And then Embiid, second half of a back-to-back, but a nice matchup against the Knicks. DeAndre Jordan is not the kind of guy that I expect to slow Embiid down because while he does post up a lot, he also can pull Jordan away from the basket, and he's just too athletic, or not too athletic for Jordan, but he has just so much athleticism and so many different things he can do that don't rely on just scoring at the rim where Jordan is, a good rim protector. So the matchup doesn't concern me, and he's another one that's averaging about 1.6 points per minute. So it goes, Jokic, Towns, and Embiid for me, but it's really close, especially between Towns and Embiid.
And then you have Andre Drummond against Boston. I've targeted Boston a few different times this year. Drummond at 9,100 feels like a price point a bit too high. I'd rather try to get up to a Jokic. You have Markkanen and Griffin eligible here. Nurkic, I don't play centers against Golden State. Wondering if you feel the same. And then we get Whiteside, Gasol. We can go on from there. But do you play these bigger centers against Golden State, or do you stay away?
I'm fine with it because Nurkic is just athletic enough that I don't think it really matters. I'm going from memory, but I'm pretty sure that he's been able to handle his minutes in prior matchups against the Warriors. No DeMarcus Cousins makes it nicer for him as well. We have seen him deal with fouls quite a bit recently. He fouled out, I think it was his last 2 games, definitely his most recent. But the price tag is just falling, and this is a 1.3 to 1.4 DraftKings point per minute guy. And he plays 30 to 32 minutes, barring foul trouble or blowouts in just about every game. So I think that it's just really, really too cheap of a price tag. Whereas Drummond, I think, has a ton of upside, maybe gets a little bit inflated ownership because he's coming off that monster game against the Wizards.
Right.
But, you can save $1,600 or $1,700 and get Nurkic who, he's volatile, but he has a ton of upside as well. So to me, it's either get up to Jokic, Towns, Embiid, whoever you like out of that group, or go to this mid-range where you have, Nurkic, or you have DeAndre Ayton in a great matchup against the Clippers, or you have, Miles Turner against Milwaukee, not quite as appealing, but the point is just that there's a lot of upside in these mid-range guys.
And you do have a lot of these power forwards eligible at center on DraftKings. You mentioned Siakam before. So you already mentioned Ayton, who is somebody I was going to ask you about. What about Harrell on the other side of that one? At 6,900, does he sneak his way in here as an upside play?
I mean, it's obviously a really good spot, and we saw him play 35 minutes against Minnesota. Interesting to see how that rotation goes moving forward, because against that big Minnesota front court, I had actually expected Harrell to play like 30 to 32 minutes, but I thought Zubats was still going to play his, 24 minutes.
Right.
He didn't. Zubats played 14.9 minutes. He didn't step on the floor after the 8-minute and 46-second mark of the third quarter. He had 3 fouls, so it's not like it was entirely, foul-based or anything like that. It's a good matchup here. If Zubats stays in the starting lineup, the scary thing for Harrell is that I expect Zubats to have success against Phoenix, so he's not going to get played off the floor. But, I still think you probably get 28 to 30 minutes from Harrell, and he has some upside there.
All right. Well, any cheaper mid-tier options here at center that you want to throw out there?
Not really. It's just not a position that I really want to go cheap because there isn't, there is a lot of opportunity cost. I guess one guy to pay attention to, and I haven't looked to see what happened in the game. I just know that he had a monster game. But actually, I think they might have said he's resting. Jonas Valanciunas, if he plays tomorrow, which for some reason I feel like I saw that he isn't, but if he does at 4,200 against Chicago, that would be interesting.
All right. So I did promise you would give your favorite play of the slate, as we're asking everybody to do, to be entered in to win a year-long, not a season-long, a year-long Awesemo.com subscription worth upwards of $700. I will ask you 2 different questions here. One, overall, looking at the slate, first glance, and again, I will say for Adam, this doesn't mean who he's going to own most when lineups lock at 6:59 on Friday night. First glance here, Thursday night recording. Who is your favorite overall play on this slate, looking at it for the first time?
Nikola Jokic.
And so I assume the same will be, I was going to ask you the 10K or above. So Jokic at 10-1 fits the same mold. Jokic, Towns, Embiid, and Antetokounmpo and Harden. You go Jokic as your favorite five-figure player as well, I assume.
Yep.
All right, there you have it. So you have Jokic. I'm going to stick with Doncic here. I'm going to stick with Doncic as the guy I'm going to own the most if I play multiple lineups. I like the price point, and I like the potential ownership. Remember, ownership matters. This is a situation as we get towards the All-Star break and we get into the second half of the season, we are going to have more and more tanking teams. The NBA gets a little messy as we head towards the end of February and into March, but ownership matters, and Awesemo.com has those ownership projections. They are not 100% accurate. I will not pretend they are, but they're damn well close, and they do a good job each and every day of helping you understand where the field is going, and for GPPs, maybe a way to get away, and for cash games, a way to leverage players that you should be on simply to match the field there. So if you are interested in becoming a member, a subscriber to Awesemo.com, and you don't want to leave it to chance, you can use the promo code EARLYBIRD, which you see on screen here on YouTube. Over on the podcast side, it's EARLYBIRD, one word. You can use that as your coupon code when checking out and get 50% off your first month of content at Awesemo.com. For those of you who want to run the risk, and hell, we're all DFS players, so maybe you'll let it ride. You want to just submit your favorite player of this slate. You can tell us why, or you can just put their name in the comment section on YouTube. You'll be entered in to win a free subscription from Awesemo.com. With that said, for Adam Scher, it's Dan Stravard. Don't forget, you'll find him on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. Find me at Dan Stravard. You'll find Adam and Emac. You'll find Lofty and Emac on Wednesday morning. You'll find, that's wrong. You'll find Emac and Lofty on Thursday morning. You're listening to me and Adam here on Wednesday morning. Friday morning, you're not going to find anybody because there's no NBA. So we will be back with you starting next week right here on the DFS Early Bird presented by Awesemo.com.